Hoid's true name, his quest, where he needs to be to complete it, and who or what he is trying to find is all about to be revealed. As a heads up, this will have spoilers not just for all of the Cosmere through Isles of the Emberdark, but unpublished, non-canon works. This includes The Traveler, a conversation between Hoid and Frost that takes place after the events of Mistborn Era 1, and The Lyre of Partenel, a book Brandon started in 2007 but never finished. Just assume if it's related to the Cosmere, it's fair game in this video. We are going to cover the who, what, when, where, why, and how of Hoid. His currently known names, not titles, are Hoid, Wit, Topaz, Midius, Dust, and Saphandrius Maxatori. That's right, Maxatori. The Saphandrius alias has a last name, but that is still not his true name. I have 3 different possibilities, each with different levels of likelihood, and each with its own level of tongue-in-cheek. The least likely option I'm going to submit is Dust, and this is by far the most tongue-in-cheek possibility that I'm mentioning solely because I think it would be hilarious. Why do I think this is a possibility? Yolish Lightweaving, as seen in Lyre of Partenel, appears to actually use Dust in its constructs. Dust is a name that could have been given by Hoid's parents, knowing that he would likely be a Lightweaver. But why would this become known as one of his pseudonyms instead of his real name? Well, in the Lyre of Partenel, we learn that Hoid is one of, if not the last remaining Lightweaver. I get the impression from the story that we have that this is due to, let's say, pressure from outside forces, ensuring that their numbers are reduced as close to 0 as possible. While Dust may have been a name that Hoid's parents gave the potential Lightweaver, hinting at his powers would have quickly become a liability, meaning a name change would be needed for his own protection. Thus, he starts going by Midius. In Way of Kings, when talking to Dalinar, Hoid name drops ad nauseam, and also says the word Balderdash, which is an anagram of Shardblade. The question that went through my mind is, what if Saphandrius is another anagram, or at the very least, contains Hoid's true name? And to be clear, there is, or at least was, a true name for Hoid. Peter Alstrom, Brandon's editor, knew his real name at one point, but is unsure if it's still canon. With some help from Andrew over at ssynth.co.uk, I was able to use his anagram solver, linked below, to try out different combinations of Saphandrius Maxatori. Future me here, I realized while editing and spell checking the captions of this video that I had been not only saying, but spelling Maxatori wrong. One of my potential names had an extra A in it. That means there are only 2 options here instead of the 3 I initially planned. But I believe that they are still the more likely combinations. While Dust is tongue-in-cheek, I really like its potential. Brandon has even said that Hoid would use Dust as a call sign if he was in the Skyward universe. And this next option, while not a complete anagram, can be spelled with just Saphandrius, and is what I believe is the essence of his true name. The final name I want to bring up is only a partial anagram, which I still discovered using the aforementioned website, but I believe it has the best chance of being in the same vein of what Hoid's true name is. Before we go into it though, you'll need a little background on Brandon's college years. While an undergraduate, Brandon took a lot of philosophy classes, so many in fact that he considered himself a closet philosophy major. He's a big fan of classical philosophers, and I don't believe it's any coincidence that there's a popular character by Plato that has this very similar name to Saphandrius. That character is a young Athenian named Phaedrus. This Greek naming scheme would go along with the name of the other viewpoint character in Lyre of Partenel, Theus, meaning god or divine, which is how that character viewed himself. Phaedrus matches with Hoid's personality as well. You see, the character Phaedrus comes from a writing called Phaedrus, which is a dialogue between Phaedrus and Socrates. This writing is a collection of 3 speeches that have a focus on love, which is used as an engine to talk about the proper use of rhetoric. These discussions encompass conversations about the soul, madness, divine inspiration, and the practice and mastery of an art. Phaedrus is the son of Lysias, whose father's name was Cephalus. Cephalus, Phaedrus, Lysias lines up almost spelling the name Saphandrius. I actually feel rather confident that we're on the right track for Phaedrus being Hoid's true name. So, let's move on to what. What is Hoid? In preparation for this video, I read every single word of Brandon that mentions Hoid, Midius, Saphandrius, Wit, or Dust, and Hoid alone has over 1,000 words of Brandon mentioning the name. This video was originally designed as a video to prove that Hoid was ad nauseam. However, that didn't work out. Unfortunately, everything I found either implies or outright states that Hoid is a human that had a natural birth. He is not a Spren, he is not ad nauseam, and he's not some other kind of deity or being. Now, you could argue something along the lines of he had a normal birth in the same way that Jesus had a normal birth, and in that way, Hoid is still human. But after reading so many Word of Brandons, I feel like this is actually going against the author's intent. Now, Hoid's soul, due to all the magic systems he's collected, the Dawn Shard, and ad nauseam knows what else he's done, is more twisted than a Steel Inquisitor. However, if you asked any of the leaders in the field, such as Vasher or Chris, or even Hoid himself, Hoid wouldn't be considered a cognitive shadow. He'd still firmly be considered human. So what Hoid is may be a rather boring answer. However, as for what Hoid is doing, in The Traveler, we have this exchange between Hoid and Frost, which I'm abridging. Frost, you will not find a way to restore what you have lost, old friend. It is impossible. The Traveler, who's Hoid, you don't know that. The old rules no longer hold. Besides, I've heard of a place. It doesn't matter. I don't care. This isn't about the dead. Or it's not just about the dead, at least. So it's a simple vendetta then. How many years have you lived and you still can't learn the wisdom of just letting go? A simple vendetta, the Traveler said. He rose, stalking up to the older man, holding out a finger and touching the man's chest. You saw what 80 nearly did. The Traveler leaned down, face even with that of his older companion. I would not think it my vendetta that should worry you, old friend. Hoid is trying to restore something that he lost, which would normally be impossible. But Hoid believes that the old rules no longer apply since ad nauseam was shattered. We also have a Word of Brandon that states that Hoid's goal is to make that which once was. It's pretty common knowledge now that Hoid was at the shattering of ad nauseam. That, along with the other shard vessels often referencing Hoid choosing not to take up a shard, does imply that Hoid assisted in the shattering. However, it's never actually stated, and in fact, Brandon has all but confirmed that Hoid was just a visitor in the shattering, not an active participant. Continuing to talk about the what will require us to also tackle the why at the same time. Because why go to the shattering if you aren't going to assist in such a grandiose event, or take any of the spoils from it? Well, what if he was simply trying to be there for an old friend? An old friend that got corrupted by the power they held for millions of years. This is corroborated by some Word of Brandons. We know that Hoid lost something or someone because of the shattering. He has something in his past he did that he regrets, and Hoid does believe that the shattering was kind of necessary. All of this leads me to the conclusion that Hoid was regretfully at the shattering, watching an old friend be destroyed. Hoid's goal isn't to reforge ad nauseam, but instead to rescue its vessel, the old friend. So we've covered who, what, and why. Now all that we're left with is the where, when, and how. Considering the timescale of the Cosmere, the when is going to be nigh impossible to pin down. There's nearly 15,000 years between the shattering of ad nauseam and the events of Mistborn Era 4, so guessing at the when would make me akin to one of the 10 Fools. And so, we have the where and how left to explore. Over on Kamashi, in the Utal system, Virtuosity splintered herself, eventually leading to the events of Yumi and the Nightmare Painting. In that book, Hoid's protections he put on a spirit web triggered due to the Father Machine, an awakened machine that's able to draw an investiture, and souls. Remember, Hoid has the ability to be where he needs to be. He just doesn't always know why he needs to be there, and Hoid needed to be there. But that isn't the where we are looking for in this video. No, Hoid's ultimate destination, that place where he will potentially complete his quest, is Braze. Braze and the Father Machine have a very curious link that can't be a coincidence. They both draw in souls. While the Father Machine accomplishes this through awakening, this happens on Braze due to the metal at the planet's core. A metal with a lot of similarities to a god metal, but one that is not connected to any shard. This brings us back to ad nauseam. When shattered, the vessel would have gone to the spiritual realm, a place all beings go upon death. The vessel didn't have to go to the beyond though. They would have been so invested that they could have just said no thanks and persisted. While the new shard holders were babies that didn't understand their powers, Adenausium was very familiar with them, and would have had no problem not only persisting as a sliver in cognitive shadow, but hiding away so that they would never be found. Or at least, so that only the correct person would find them. Back in 2014, Brandon was asked if Hoid had ever been to Braze. His response? Raffo, the biggest Raffo. Going back to the Traveler, Hoid says, "Besides, I know a place." This conversation happened right after the events of Mistborn Era 1. Thousands of years before that, Hoid had visited Braze when the Oath Pact was created. When having this conversation, Hoid knows a place because he had been there. Saying the biggest Raffo because of Hoid happening to be there when the Oath Pact was formed doesn't pass the smell test. However, if Brandon was instead thinking of Hoid's endgame and not a scene that Hoid happens to be in, the biggest Raffo makes perfect sense. Braze is the key to accomplishing Hoid's goals. But how is he going to find Adenausium's vessel? This is the true reason Hoid is going around and collecting the different magic systems. Since, as stated in The Traveler, the old rules no longer apply, Hoid is collecting the different systems' magics as a key to reaching Adenausium. So far, we know that Hoid is at least a third ideal Lightweaver, with access to the surges of transformation and illumination, and a living blade. It has also been all but confirmed that Hoid has access to Sand Mastery, is at least the second heightening, is now an Elantrian and can access the door, a full Mistborn, potentially a full Ferrochemist. There's a wob that implies that he is, but it may have been a misspeak because the question he was asked sort of seemed like it was framed to trick Brandon. And he has access to Yolish Lightweaving. And that's just magic that we know the origin of. He also has the ability to manipulate fortune, which comes from a magic system we haven't seen yet, has limited future sight, healing that predates any other form we've seen, and that works on a spiritual level, the ability to appear to look different to two different people looking at him at the same time, has the Moon Scepter, Hemalurgic Spikes, Adium, and a freaking Dawn Shard. He's doing all of this because he hopes that getting every form of magic will unlock some kind of special effect. This isn't just conjecture either. This is confirmed by Brandon. Speaking of different magic systems, remember the vision Dalinar gave to Kaladin in Rhythm of War? Hoid doesn't know how Dalinar did it, but Brandon has confirmed that he would be very interested in finding out. I bring this up because of Hoid's goal and how he is going to accomplish it. At the very least, having access to every source of magic would theoretically increase the connection Hoid has to Adenausium's old vessel. It may even create a sort of line that Hoid could follow to lead him directly to the vessel, similar to how you can track previous owners of the Dawn Shards by finding the current holder. Braze is a dangerous planet, and one that Retribution has taken special interest in, so it's dangerous for Hoid to go there again. However, if he knows exactly where to go due to this connection, then he will be able to find the vessel and escape without suffering Retribution's retribution. So who? Phaedrus. What? The vessel of Adenausium. When? Honestly, impossible to say. Where? Braze. Why? To find an old friend. And how? By collecting as many different magic systems as possible so that a connection can be restored. Despite all this, there is still so much more to learn about Hoid. What's up with the perfume he was drinking in Bands of Mourning? What about his flute? What's the deal with Topaz? He had a little brother at one point. Is that still canon? There's also a potential counterpart to Hoid that has black hair instead of Hoid's white. Could this be the Socrates of the Phaedrus dialogue I mentioned earlier? There is always another secret. I have a mind map I made about Hoid. This doesn't have very many citations as it was originally created for my eyes only. But if you want to check it out, there will be a link in the description. No accounts needed to view it. And guys, this took a lot of work. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with people. I don't normally ask that, but it'll really help. Thanks.